Hi, marry me. This is going to be a video response to Pagyptsian on her excellent video about the triple god. And as I watched it, I really enjoyed it, by the way. I had some points I wanted to address. First of all, I really liked how you put it with basically the underworld being in the goddess's womb, because really it's a very good way to look at it, that basically the rivers of the primordial, the potential and so on is within the goddess in that way, and is then birthed from her. And really life and death, when you look at it, basically with then an unborn, whatever it is, an actual fetus, or it is somebody that might be born, is between lives, but where they will come out is from a woman's womb. So in very many ways I think it's a very good idea to see the underworld, the land of the dead and so on, as being in a woman's womb, is being in the goddess womb. But on the way to the god, one thing I do like the way you structure the idea of a triple god. One thing I don't agree with is the idea of the king as the sage and so on, because if you look at it historically, the king is really the biggest badass out there. I mean, yeah, sure, today most monarchs are old, because really they aren't warriors anymore, they are there for show. But if you look historically, the monarch was the strongest, most powerful, most imposing man you can find. I mean, Alexander the Great, for example, just to take somebody out of there, these kings could kick ass, and very much they are the father archetype, because it's a macrocosmos thing, with the husband being the head of the home and also the home's protector. The king was the head of the nation, but also the nation's protector. In many ways, the king was the husband of the nation, and in fact it was often presented just as that the king was the nation's husband. So the way I see it, and I'm not saying that you're wrong in any way, I mean, I'm just expressing my personal views. A king historically is a man in his prime. So yeah, as for the topic generally, I have never really understood that idea with the goddess being triple, but a god not, because really what the triple goddess symbolizes is stages within a woman's life, which can then also be symbolized with, for example, the phases of the moon, the phases of nature, and so on and so forth. And really, he has the stages. He is a young boy, he is a husband and a father, and he is an old man. Well, you do have in history triple goddesses. You have examples of it. For example, Hecate. Perhaps example that is closer to the Wiccan idea of the triple goddess is in Norse mythology with the Norns, the three fates, with Urd, Skuld and Vandale, who are often depicted as an old woman, a woman in her prime, and a young woman. Now, this isn't always how they're depicted. Often they're also depicted all as old women, but often they have that concept, and they are said to be of three different ages. So you have examples of that. But really, what a triple goddess is amalgamations of various different goddesses. I mean, many see Kore or Persephone as basically a younger version of her mother Demeter, so that then Kore becomes the maiden, Demeter is the mother, and so on, and then you sort of put them together. And really you can find examples of gods in all of these stages as well. So yeah, the way I personally see it is that I see the god as having basically many stages, but if you're going to name 3 of them, it would be the child of promise, because really that is very much what the god is at Yule and in his early stages. He is an child of promise is very much a play on word, because yes, he is the prophesied child. You can you can see this also in the Christian concept of Jesus. Basically, he is a child of promise. Or for that matter, you find this concept very often in fantasy books. One of the reasons I really love reading fantasy is that you often find so many nods to paganism, where you often have the main character as a child of promise, someone who has been prophesied to be born to save the world. And really that is what you, when you have a child of promise, but it's also a play of word that at this stage the god is pure potential. He is a babe or a small child, and he's just promise, he is potential. And then you have the Lord of the Sun, which is the strong, the powerful. He's the sun god, he's the warrior, he's the quintessential male. And then you have the Lord of the Underworld, which is the wise sage, the wise man, the Lord of Death, and so on. And really you can see the same thing. You mentioned Jesus, and I'm going to really point this out as well, because really when you look at the story of Jesus, you find exactly the same story as neo-pagans very often go by. He is born as a child of promise. He is born at well, not really if you're going to go with most likely history, but let's go by legend here. And he is then a child of promise. You have a few stories of him as a child as well, and basically he is the child of promise. And then in the main part of his story, he's around 30, I think. He's, if I'm not completely mistaken, and I might be, sorry, I have these eye problems. Anyway, at his prime, when he's a healer, he's a preacher, he's a prophet, he's very much a leader. At that point he is in his early 30s, which you can say is the prime for a man. He is then fully grown, he is at his peak of physical strength. And then he is sacrificed for the betterment of humankind, and very much becomes a lord of death, because while he do not only do he return from death, but he goes to heaven to greet departed souls when they pass. So basically you have exactly the same concept. And you can look at Maria the same way as well. When you first meet her, she is a young maiden. Then she becomes a mother. And at the crucifixion, she is there to help her son pass into death. And she also tends the body after he has died. So then she is there in her role as the crone. So really, for many pagans who feel that they are looked at strangely for their pagan imagery, you could just as well use the Christian imagery, because it is very much the same. And really, I very often use the the image of Jesus as a symbol of the God, like I've showed this before, but my little carry-along altar I have on my phone, where I basically have this which just rises energy, and I can use it for healing, and I also use it to, well, for different sort of things, and it stands for the one. And I have this female enemy figure for the goddess, and a miniature praying beads, a miniature rosary with a crucifix for the god. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Basically, the concept of, I think that many people are uncomfortable with the idea of the god, one of the god's faces being the lord of the underworld, but that is only if you see that as evil. Basically, a lot of mythologies have a god that becomes the ruler in the realm of death. And you can look at Odin from Norse mythology, is very much is both the lord of the sun and the ruler of the underworld at the same time, because he is definitely a warrior. I mean, Odin is a badass. I mean, he's a Viking god, and Vikings Vikings feared growing old and dying peacefully in bed, because that meant that you would go to hell, which was the least desirable afterlife. Now, Vikings didn't have this idea of a hell, even though that's where the word comes from, but basically they didn't have this idea of a place where you would be punished at all times. But basically, if you could not prove yourself to be a good warrior, you would not get a chance to be a warrior in the afterlife either. But anyway, Odin was very much a warrior god, but he is also the master of Valhalla, which is the most desirable afterlife for Viking men. So yeah, I also think that if you look at the various gods and the various mythologies, you will find a lot more than just 3 faces. And really, if you look at the moon or the sun, there is a lot more. I mean, let's take the moon. It is completely black. Then it goes larger and larger and larger and larger and larger until it's full, and then it goes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It's not just a tree, but it's a simple concept to build on. And as such, I feel that if you look at the various gods, you can clearly see that they are, you can sort a lot of them into the idea of as basically a very young god with pure potential, who might not have done a lot, might not have gotten a lot of, build up a lot of legend for himself. You have the Horus child, you have baby Jesus, and for a little bit older versions, you could say very much Helios in many myths, though you could say that he's becoming the Lord of the Sun, and being the sun god he really should be, but at the same time he's very young, and so on. Have a lot of ideas of child gods, and you also have a lot of the idea of this strong, powerful god who is very virile, he's very basically manly, and is very much the Lord of the Sun, the Lord of everything, and so on and so forth. And you also have a lot of examples of gods who are a lord of the underworld. And sometimes you have them transition from that. Let's go back to Christianity for a moment and look at, for example, the story of Lucifer. Now Lucifer is created and becomes then he is a young angel. He is the he is the protege, the right hand of God. And you can very much say that then he is the child of promise. Then he rebels and becomes a great warrior. I mean, he gave them hell out there. He had a lot fewer warriors. I mean, he took a third of the angelic host. And they waged war like nobody's business. But eventually he loses and he gets sent down to hell to become the lord of the underworld. You have this concept again and again and again, and I'm not of course saying that other ways of sorting it isn't equally valid. I'm saying how I look at it. So and in fact, when you look at it, you very often find this more with gods than with goddesses, because you have a lot of mother goddesses, but you actually have a lot fewer old women goddesses or girl goddesses. You have, for example, Persephone from Greek mythology. You have them, of course, but there's a lot more goddesses that is this idea of a woman in the prime of her life who is fertile. And I think that is very often because people prayed to gods for strength, for power to conquer their enemies, and so on and so forth. And they prayed to female goddesses to protect their home, to become fertile, and so on. So, and of course this isn't universal. You have all goddesses presented as old women, you have goddesses presented as young girls. But I'm just saying that there is more legends actually with gods, that either you have gods in various stages, or you have gods who transition between those stages. So yeah, I very much feel that I mean, my teacher, when I was when I had a teacher from I was 16 to I was 24 that taught me about occult. And he said that, look at the gods any way you want, but basically do the same for the goddess and the god within one ritual. Basically, if you represent the goddess with seashells, represent the god with something equally. And I feel that there are many ways to look at the gods, but if you're going to look at the goddess as a triple goddess, then I also think it makes sense to look at the god as a triple god. And I see a bit of the basically, and in a way the god is also always there. Basically, the goddess doesn't die, she transitions without death. And in some ways you could say that she is always these three aspects. If you're looking at her as a triple goddess, I mean, if you look at Hecate, she has three faces at once, while the god always transitions. And in a way this ties into yin and yang, because yin is static, yin is calm, while yang is always fluctuating, yang is always moving. So yin stays still while yang moves. And in a way the goddess is always these three aspects. She doesn't that much change, as she's always a young woman, an old woman, and a crone, while the god constantly circles. But he's also always there, even if for a while he is in death, because he doesn't just disappear when he's in death. He goes to the underworld and becomes lord there. Then he is reborn into life again. So I would say both of them are always there, they're always present. But I think in many ways the goddess is basically the stationary thing, and the god moves around. And that's how their dance works. Basically, It's like with electrons, you have that which is basically, with electricity I mean, one that attracts the others repulsed. You have this dance with constantly with the goddess being the calm, the static, the very stationary, while the god is this firecracker who always changes. But yeah, that is what I wanted to say. I really liked the video. Have a great day, and blessed be.